Okay, you all, I think we should begin. So tonight, I think we'll easily cover chapters 34 through 38. Since we didn't meet last Thursday, let me just see, I'm assuming that you read these chapters every time so that it's not new material, but let me just recap a little bit from a few weeks ago. And specifically chapter 33, which is finally Jacob's return to the land. Again, he was fleeing as he fled in the beginning from his brother. Now he's fleeing from his father-in-law. He's a problematic character, and perhaps one of the most flawed characters. And we're going to continue to see how his sins, his flaws, continue to be acted out in his children, and what comes. But ironically, so far, we've only met one or two noble people. And Esau, again, is a contrast, okay? A contrast. Even though he hated his brother and sought ways to take revenge and kill him early on, and so that's what caused Jacob to flee. Now he comes back. Jacob can't imagine that Esau is still not that way, okay? Still not that way. That instead he finds Esau loving, forgiving, helpful in any way, and he still cannot trust. Okay, remember again, the lack of faith in the Bible always has to do with trust. Okay, it has nothing to do with the mental gymnastics of what we believe, creeds and whatnot. It has to do with trust. It's relational by definition, and Jacob is not a very trusting person, and for good reason. Because of his own flaws. So again, just remember, Esau is one of the sort of magnificent people in chapter 33, which highlights Jacob's lack of trust. Now, and ultimately in the Bible, it's a lack of trust in God. Okay, that's the primary, that the one who started off creating, providing, making a habitable dry ground, providing all that, and so on. So the human being has this problem of continuing to trust, okay? And that's the whole story of Abraham as well. See, leave your motherland and go to the place I'll show you, and I will make, the promise and whatnot, okay? And so it's always issue is trust, usually lack of trust and whatnot. So anyway, so we have this incredible return and the incredible magnanimity of Esau. And then, of course, Jacob declines all hospitality, again, because he doesn't really trust, including protection. Okay. Needless to say, it goes full circle, as we said, that he comes to this city of Shechem, which is where Abraham first, when he left his homeland, came. Okay, so it's symbolic. Okay, the story has gone full circle, and you're back again as if you're starting all over. Okay, the full circle, the new beginning, we get to start again. And the theme I want to just share with you this night is, how many times do we have to start all over again and again and again? Because you're going to see this repetition, okay, starting again. So in this sense, Jacob has had his sort of encounter with God, okay? He's gotten a new name, okay, to show the symbolism of the encounter, where he's been stripped. Again, I recall that strange sort of night visitor. See, it doesn't even, where he's been stripped of everything. He's alone, his family's on the other side and whatnot, preparing for what he thinks Esau might do. But no, he is there when he has struggled, he has persevered, but he's also in symbolic way bereft of everything. And it's restored to him. He gets in, he gets the land. Okay, so this is the beginning of chapter 34. And again, see how quickly the Bible takes us from the new beginning back, for the lack of better metaphors, back to the toilets, okay? Back to a horrible place. Okay, so chapter 34, let's begin. Now, Dinah, the daughter of Leah, Dinah's name is important because it means judgment, okay? So symbolic name relative to chapter 34. Whom she had born to Jacob, went out to visit the women of the region. Again, sojourners in the land of promise. Okay. So when Shechem, son of Hamor, the Hivite, prince of the region. Okay, so a man of substance and whatnot. Ironically, his father's name is Donkey. Okay, it's meant also again to be humorous. Okay, that this because you wouldn't name your father, you wouldn't name your child Donkey. But anyway, that's part of the humor of the story. Prince of the region, so he seized her and laid with her by force. Okay, Dinah's raped. And his soul was drawn to Dinah, daughter of Jacob. He loved the girl. So, okay, what started off as just pure attraction, lust, whatnot, and so on and so forth, and spoke tenderly to her. So Shechem spoke to his father Hamor, Donkey, saying, "Get me this girl to be my wife." Okay, so even the fact that it went so quickly to the horrible sort of rape, now to marriage and love in the young man's brain. Okay, so which quickly makes the story more ambiguous morally. Okay, the immoral act, but now the moral act. Okay, which just complicates the situation. It's not black and white. The reason this is important is because there will be another rape in David's household. Okay, and the response will not be that. The rapist will actually loathe the woman he raped. This one, no, he wants her for his wife. Let's see Jacob's reaction. Jacob heard that Shechem had defiled his daughter Dinah, but his sons were with the cattle in the field, so Jacob held his peace until they came. So Jacob doesn't act. Hamor, the father of Shechem, went out to Jacob to speak with him, just as the sons of Jacob came in from the field. When they heard of it, the men were indignant and very angry because he had committed an outrage in Israel by lying with Jacob's daughter, for such a thing ought not to be done. Okay, so yes, righteous anger. But Hamor spoke with them, saying, "The heart of my son Shechem longs for your daughter. Please give her to him in marriage." Right? So, the father's negotiating the marriage contract. Okay. "Make marriages with us, give us your daughters to us, take our daughters for yourselves. You shall live with us, and the land shall be open to you. Live and trade in it and get property in it." Okay. In other words, let us live in peace and harmony. Okay. We can overcome this. Right? So it's an open invitation to live appropriately with your neighbors. Shechem also said to her fathers and to her brothers, here again is the ambiguity on the good side. "Let me find favor with you." Okay. I should have looked up this word favor because I'm curious if it's actually grace. Okay. "Whatever you say to me, I will give. Put the marriage present and gift as high as you like. I will give whatever you ask, only give me the girl to be my wife." Okay, so justice is to be done. Okay. They get to name it, so whatever it is, so that the burden is on them. Okay, on them. Okay? The dowry, if you will. Okay. So this actually puts him now in obviously a much better light. Okay? The sons of Jacob answered Shechem and his father Hamor deceitfully. Okay. Now, we've had this word before. It is the singular word that has defined Jacob's life. Okay. From the moment he deceived his father, right, and stole the birthright. Okay. And then he claims foul when Laban deceives him and gives him Leah before what he wanted was the younger daughter, Rachel. And now, once again, we see this thread that ties this story from the beginning to another crisis point. Because he had defiled. Okay, so the sons of Jacob answered Shechem and his father deceitfully because he had defiled their sister Dinah. They said to him, okay, follow the argument. "We cannot do this thing to give our sister to one who is uncircumcised. Okay? For that would be a disgrace to us." Okay. Now, to insert this condition, and this has not been inserted anywhere before, and you're going to see in a second, a couple chapters later, when Judah gets married to a non-clannish member, okay, it's not a problem. But so only on this condition will we consent to you that you will become as we are, and every male among you be circumcised, Then we will give out daughters to you, and we will take your daughters for ourselves, and we will live among you, become one people. But if you do not listen to us and be circumcised, then we will take our daughter and be gone. So, which means you have to remember chapter 17 of the introduction and the covenant between Abraham and God, and circumcision being the sign, okay? And circumcision, okay, is something that is done unto the male. So you are not born in the covenant of Abraham. You are not made a part of his household, okay? No, you are not born into his household. You are made part of his household by circumcision, okay? By circumcision. This new covenant of peace and promise, okay? So notice they're acting deceitful, and their blasphemy has to do with co-opting the sacredness of the covenant with Abraham. Because technically, and this is the point, if you circumcise them, they become de facto part of Abraham's household. They become heirs of the promise, you see, that, I will make you a great nation and the world will be blessed through you and nations and so on and so forth. Okay, so this is, you have to see the depth, not just of their deceit, but what they use to deceive, okay? So the sacrilege of their choice. Okay, so these words pleased Hamor and Hamor's son Shechem. And the young man did not delay to do the thing because he was delighted with Jacob's daughter. Okay, so again, remember, we've had love stories already, with the Jacob and Rachel story. Okay, a love story, but he ended up having to get the older daughter first. Anyway, so it's all about delighted with Jacob's daughters. Now he was the most honored of all of his family. Okay, so put that little sort of note there. So Hamor and his son Shechem came to the gate of their city, spoke to the men of their city, saying, these people are friendly with us. And we go, because we already know, ha ha. Let them live in the land, trade in it, for the land is large enough for them. Let us take their daughters in marriage. Let us give them our daughters. Only on this condition will they agree to live among us, become one people. And that is the function of the circumcision, see, to unite. Okay, and again, it was every male. It had nothing to do with your blood. Okay, it had to do with just being in Abraham's tent, slaves and whatnot. Anyway, will not their livestock, their property, and all their animals be ours? Only let us agree with them, and they will live among us. And all who went out to the city gate heeded Hamor and his son Shechem, and every male was circumcised, all who went out to the gate of his city. Okay, so now don't ask questions. How did all this? No. It's meant to be, on one hand, irony, and what lies ahead. So on the third day, and the irony. Okay, let's just say it. The irony also has to do with the offending organ that started this whole scenario, right? With the rape. Okay, so. The levels of irony, the biblical writers also had their humor as well. So on the third day, when they were still in pain, two of the sons of Jacob, Simeon and Levi, Dinah's brothers, okay, took their swords and came against the city unawares and killed all the males. Okay, so the idea of revenge. But point of revenge is it's not just on the offending person, Shechem, but it's on every male. And again, if they're circumcised, they are technically part of Abraham's household, and therefore you are slaughtering your own. Okay, you just have to make all these connections to see the heinous evil in all of this. So, and then, see, the other sons of Jacob, so came upon the slain and plundered the city. Okay? Plundered the city because their sister had been defiled. They took their flocks and their herds, their donkeys, whatever was in the city and the field, all their wealth, all their little ones and their wives, all that was in the houses, they captured and made their prey. Okay? So this isn't about justice, ultimately. It's more about slaughter and revenge way beyond the boundaries of Old Testament law. I mean, you'll read it as you get into later. It's the eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. Whatever the crime is, you pay the price. Okay, and they are now charging way beyond the allotted price. So they're revealed for what they are, which are horrible. Okay, so then Jacob said to Simeon and Levi, "You have brought trouble on me by making me odious to the inhabitants of the land." See, my point is they're in the land 5 minutes and they're already completely not merely not living in harmony and peace with their neighbors, which is what they're supposed to do. Okay. Because ultimately, again, Genesis, it's for everyone. God's concern is for the entirety. Okay. So you have about trouble and so on and so forth. The Canaanites, the Perizzites, my numbers are few, and if they gather themselves against me and attack me, I shall be destroyed, both I and my household. But they said, should our sister be treated like a whore? Okay, again, making excuses for their excesses. So my point is, they get into the land, and then chapter 34 is one horror story of disaster, not initiated by them, but made worse by them. So brings us to chapter 35. God said to Jacob, "Arise, go to Bethel and settle there." Now, remember what I said about beginnings. Right? We had a new beginning. Jacob gets back in the land, settles in Shechem. Now we have another beginning, because Bethel was the place of his exit. If you recall back in chapter 28, when he was leaving the country and had his vision of the ladder and whatnot, and then the promise that I will be with you and bless you and so on and so forth, and you shall prosper and I'll bring you back. Okay. So they're going back to the point of exit where God had appeared earlier. So arise, go to Bethel, settle there, make an altar there to God who appeared to you when you fled from your brother Esau. So Jacob said to his household and to all who were with him, catch this next few verses, put away the foreign gods that are among you, purify yourselves, change your clothes, then come, let us go to Bethel, that I may make an altar there to God who answered me in the day of my distress, previously, and has been with me wherever I have gone. So they gave to Jacob all the foreign gods that they had and the rings that were in their ears, and Jacob hid them under the oak that was near Shechem. And they journeyed. As they journeyed, a terror from God fell upon all the cities all around them, that no one pursued them, again, to avenge the slaughter. And Jacob came to Luz, that is Bethel, which is in the land of Canaan, he and his people who were with him. There he built an altar, called it El Bethel, God, the house of God, because it was here that God had revealed to him when he had fled from his brother. And Deborah, Rebekah's nurse, died and was buried under an oak below Bethel, and it is called blah, blah, blah. So the idea of the clothes, the cleansing, the putting away the gods is to start again. Okay, that's what I would say. So we have another restart or reset button, if you will, in the story and in the plot. Okay, so we'll start again. So, but what I want you to follow again is the constant sinfulness of Jacob and his past. Now it's his children. It's been passed on. You see, sort of the sins of the father are now the sins of the children, and so on and so forth. And it keeps going. And this is, sadly, the legacy of the bad Jacob, not the name Israel, which is the one who was stripped of everything, but the one who finally struggled with God, got the blessing and the promise. Okay, so it's all murky. Okay, it's all murky. Yes, you have the promise, starting with Abraham, the promise that was given to Isaac, the promise that was given to Jacob, in spite of his deceit. That's even a point that makes it more ambiguous and morally confusing, because we want to assume that if someone is the recipient of God's blood, that he's a good guy by definition. And the point of the story is Jacob is not a good guy by any definition, nor are his children. Okay, And you have to remember that, because we're only in Genesis. We haven't read Exodus, and we haven't read Joshua or 1st and 2 Samuel, 1st and 2 Kings, and so on, because the story of sinfulness is going to continue. And God is going to continue to work despite it. And that is a point that needs to be said now, because you're going to see it later, that in spite of the circumstances, God is still wants to find a way to redeem the circumstances of the human being. Genesis 1, Genesis 2, Genesis 3, Adam and Eve, Genesis 5, Noah, Genesis 11, the Tower of Babel, Abraham, trying to work within and not just wash his hands like he did in the story of Noah, except for Noah. So again, just to see this. So my point is, the Bible is basically a depressing book. Well, that's too. Genesis is basically a depressing book about the human being. Now focusing on Jacob, okay, and then his children. Okay, it's basically depressing, except for the occasional noble person, Esau, who was the one that was completely dispossessed. But that's another story. Anyway, so this is chapter 35, verse 9. Okay, God appeared to Jacob again when he came from Pada Aram, and he blessed him. God said to him, "Your name is Jacob. No longer shall it be called Jacob, but Israel shall be your name." So you have this, we've had this story already, but it's being repeated because, as I said, we're starting again, we're resetting. But Israel shall be your name. So he was called Israel. And God said to him, okay, again, "I am God Almighty, the powerful one. Be fruitful and multiply." Okay, the Genesis blessing that's been repeated. Okay, so when I say beginning, it's referencing just the first command to be fruitful and multiply. Okay, because the promised land is supposed to be the Garden of Eden functionally. So be fruitful and multiply. A nation and a company of nations shall come from you, and kings shall spring from you. The land that I gave to Abraham and Isaac, I will give to you. I will give the land to your offspring after you. Then God went out from him at the place where he had spoken with him. Jacob set up a pillar in the place where he had spoken with him, a pillar of stone. He poured out a drink offering on it and poured oil on it. So Jacob called the place where God had spoken to him Bethel. Okay, so again. So despite, and this is, when the Bible talks about mercy, okay, it is simply God choosing to be merciful, not because we deserve mercy. For example, one of my sons recently got a speeding ticket going 73 and a 55, right? Oops, a little bit too fast. The policeman decided to show mercy and gave him a ticket for going 56 and 55, okay? No reason, he didn't have to. He just chose to let it sting a little bit less in hopes that maybe he would smarten up, okay? Not speed quite so above the limit, okay? My point is, mercy is not something that's ever deserved. It's just someone makes the choice to be merciful. And of course, without mercy in our lives and in our relationships, there's no hope for them, okay? Just the constant threat of judgment. Anyway, so verse 16. So they journeyed from Bethel, and when they were still distant from Ephraim, Rachel was in childbirth. See? The one who could never conceive, okay? Who could never conceive, finally had the one son, Joseph. That's it, okay? So be fruitful and multiply, sign of God's blessing. Rachel was in childbirth, and she had hard labor. And when she was in her hard labor, the midwife said to her, "Do not be afraid, for now you will have another son." Okay? You remember the stories of the competing sisters on who would have the children and whatnot, and then with the midwives, with the handmaidens and whatnot. So as her soul was departing, for she died, she named him Ben-Oni. Okay, Ben means son. Okay, Oni means suffering, sorrow. But his father called him Benjamin. Okay, so Now, Ben-Ami reflects her experience. Benjamin is a totally different name. Okay, and you need to see the clash just right here, because Benjamin means son of my right hand, which is my right hand of power. See, the warrior son, the military son, the one who is going to protect and whatnot. Okay, and so he gives him a, a powerful name, not a name of suffering. Okay, so Rachel died, and she was buried on her way to Ephrath, that is Bethlehem. Jacob set up a pillar at her grave. It is the pillar of Rachel's tomb, which is there to this day. Israel journeyed on and pitched his tent beyond the Tower of Ether. So now, what strikes me funny is that this is the beloved wife. This is the one he labored, slaved for 14 years, okay? This is the one, recall, a few chapters ago, that he inadvertently cursed because she had stolen her father's gods and whatnot, and said the one who did that will not live, okay? So you have to connect these threads to see that Rachel also here has faced her own judgment, her own suffering, but she has a son, and that seems to be all that Jacob cares about. Rachel, the beloved wife, gone, no more, put her aside, okay? So my point is that we just had the vision and the promise again with the name and so on and so forth, and immediately it's followed by this tragic sort of continuation of the story that was predated the new beginning, okay, in the person of Rachel. Okay, so again, it's from the point of view of pure drama, okay, if we were to watch this on Netflix, it would be exhausting. Okay? The tragedy would just finally, oh, come on. I want something light. I don't want all this heaviness and all this horror all the time. Just, give me some comedy, okay? And the only comedy is, well, we won't go back to that. Anyway, so Rachel, buried, they're moving. Well, Israel lived in the land. Reuben, the firstborn, okay, the firstborn. And we always know the firstborns always have problems because the younger ones are trying to steal their place. Went and lay with Bilhah, his father's concubine. And Israel, now called Israel, heard of it. Okay? Again, does nothing. Now, this event will reappear, this repetition will reappear in the story of David. And you can read it if you want to sort of look up how it is used. But it's bad news, okay? Because the concubine belongs to the father. And for the son to lay with the concubine means he's claiming that he is the heir, okay? Not just heir apparent as the firstborn, but he's taking over. He's taking over, okay? Because I hate to say it, it's a technical legal issue. Okay? So why throw that in the middle of all of this, okay, as just a small factoid? Okay? Because it doesn't move the story anywhere, okay? It doesn't move the story at all. It just, again, shows the constant struggle and fight for whoever's going to be the successor, whoever's going to be at the top, which defines Jacob's life. And now it's happening again with Reuben, okay, the firstborn. Now the sons of Jacob were 12, the sons of Leah, Reuben, Jacob's firstborn, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, see, lots of sons, the sons of Rachel, Joseph, and Benjamin. The sons of Bilhah, Rachel's maid, Dan, Naphtali, the sons of Zilpah, Leah's maid, Gad, and Asher. These are the sons of Jacob, were born to him in Padan Aram, in exile. Jacob came to his father Isaac, someone who we have not heard from for several chapters. Isaac, functionally in the story, just has a bit of a cameo appearance, right? He does nothing, but nothing bad happens to him. He just stays and lives a long life, which is the point here. He came to his father at Mamre, or Kiriath Arba, Hebron, where Abraham and Isaac had resided as aliens. Now the days of Isaac were 183, and Isaac breathed his last. He died and is gathered to his people, old and full of days, and his sons Esau and Jacob buried him. Okay, so You have to contrast, my point is, Isaac's life compared to the struggle of his son. Okay? And then Esau, who just, despite not getting anything from his father except a promise of a blessing, is there. Which brings us to the strange chapter 36. Now, again, ancient writing is done on scrolls, right? Parchment, okay, not computers that print out whatnot. So to take a whole chapter, which is what this whole chapter 36 is, which is why we can almost just skip over it quickly. But I want to show you that they're taking a whole chapter merely to talk about the genealogy of Esau. Okay? A whole chapter. And if you read the whole chapter, it far outweighs, it's far greater than the genealogy of Jacob. Okay. And it goes on and on and on. The whole chapter, I could, these are the descendants of Esau. Esau took wives from the Canaanites, blah, 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 and other wives. And then he had all of these sons and daughters and all members of his house with all his cattle and all his property. He had acquired land. He moved to the land distant from his brother Jacob, across the Jordan River, if you will. He settled in the land of Edom. These are the descendants of Esau. And it goes on and on and on and on and on, all the way to the end. These are the names of the clans of Esau, according to their families, their localities by their names, and so on and so forth. So it is as if, okay, the biblical writer is poking again at Jacob, the one who you deceived and whatnot, the one who chose ultimately to forgive and is blessed beyond imagination without, if you will, the drama and sinfulness of Jacob and his children. Because we're only in chapter 37 and we got to get to chapter 50 in 2 more weeks. And you can see that is a little bit of a slam in my book, because you can take that chapter out because it means nothing to the overall story, okay? But the fact that it was put there to contrast with everything that we've seen so far, so you can see how it is jabbing, okay, at Jacob again, the biblical writer, whoever the writer of Genesis was, okay? So you get to chapter 37. Jacob settled in the land where his father had lived as an alien in the land of Canaan. This is the generation, the genealogy of the family of Jacob. Your translation might use the word story, but in Hebrew, it's the same word as descendants and genealogy and generations. And so it's the same word. Joseph, his first son from his most beloved wife, was being 17 years old, was shepherding the flock with his brothers. He was a helper to the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah, his father's wives. And Joseph brought a bad report to them to their father. Okay, so 17, he's tattling. Let's not pretend. He's tattling on them. We don't know what he's saying. That's not the point. It's the point of we're going to be introduced to the person of Joseph. Okay, so get a sense of who he is, because he's the next major figure. Okay, he's the next major figure till the very end. Now, Israel loved Joseph more than any other of his children. We've had this before. Isaac loved Esau. Rebekah loved Jacob. It created a problem. Favoritism. Because he was the son of his old age, actually Benjamin was, so I don't know what to say about that, and he had made him a long robe with sleeves. Now, in Hebrew, this is not just, okay, I don't have a robe, I have a shirt on with long sleeves. It's an ornamental robe. It's a tunic, if you will, okay? So it's a symbol, okay? Not only of the father's love, but favoritism. Okay? When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all the other brothers, they hated him, could not speak peaceably to him. So again, you see Jacob's sin coming back. Okay? Now again, think of Cain and Abel, hate. Okay, Cain went out, ultimately slaughtered Abel. Jacob and Esau. Esau hated Jacob for stealing it. Okay, now we have again, they hated him, could not speak peaceably to him. Attribute number 2. Once Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him even more. Okay. Now, we've had dreams before where God is talking or revealing and whatnot, but there's no reference to God. He just had a dream. And he said to them, listen to this dream that I had dreamed. Okay. Talking about himself. Now, what is the content of it? There we were, binding sheaves in the field. Suddenly my sheaf rose up and stood upright, and then your sheaves gathered around it. Bow down to my sheaf. And his brothers said to him, they got the message, are you indeed to reign over us? See? So sibling rivalry. Reign is related to kingship, okay? Are you going to be our Lord? Are you indeed to have dominion? Okay. So they hated him. Third time the word hate has been used in, let's see, a few verses. Even more because of his dreams and his words. So something bad is brewing. He had another dream and told it to his brothers, saying, look, I've had another dream. The sun, the moon, and 11 stars were bowing down to me. But when he told it to his father and to his brothers, his father rebuked him and said to him, what kind of dream is this that you have had? Shall we indeed come, I and your mother and your brothers, bow to the ground before you? So his brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the matter in mind. What is the meaning? Now his brothers went to pasture, and their father's flock near Shechem. Okay, so back to the place of slaughter. Israel said to Joseph, are not your brothers pasturing the flock at Shechem? Come, I will send you to them. He answered, here I am. So he said to him, go now, see if it is well with your brothers and with the flock, and bring word back to me. So he sent him from the valley of Hebron. Now, I haven't mentioned the beautiful name of Hebron. It comes from the Hebrew word for friendship, and actually means fellowship. Okay, the valley of fellowship, camaraderie, brotherhood. Okay, so he came to Shechem, and a man found him wandering in the fields. The man asked him, what are you seeking? I am seeking my brothers. He said, tell me, please, where are they pasturing the flock? The man said, they have gone away, for I heard them say, let us go to Dothan. So Joseph went after his brothers and found them at Dothan. 18, they saw him from a distance, and before he came near to them, they conspired to kill him. Okay? To get rid of the pretentious dreamer, the favored son. Okay? Because again, competition not just for paternal affection, but for who inherits. Okay? Again, the sin of Jacob coming back full circle, now in his own family. They said to one another, here comes the dreamer. Come now, let us kill him. Second time. Throw him into one of the pits. Then we shall say that a wild animal has devoured him, and we shall see what will become of his dreams. But when Reuben, the firstborn, heard of it, he delivered him out of their hands, saying, let us not take his life. Reuben said to them, shed no blood, throw him into the pit here in the wilderness, but lay no hand on him. And then an aside, that he might rescue him out of their hand and restore him to his father. So Reuben had good intention. But the idea also of not to have the blood of your brother. We saw this in the story of Cain and Abel. The importance of the curse of Cain is when you spill innocent blood. Okay? So it is a heinous crime, of which there must be justice, retribution. So negotiating what to do. So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, okay? The long robe with sleeves that he wore. Symbolic action, okay? Symbolic action. To strip him of his robe, in this sense, of his favoritism, of who he is, in relationship to his father, and so on and so forth. They have made him naked, stripped him. Sort of like when Jacob was stripped of everything in this story of the night visitor and the wrestling, okay? But this is now happening here. So they took him and threw him into a pit. The pit was empty, there was no water in it. Then they sat down to eat. And looking up, they saw a caravan of Ishmaelites. Now, remember the story of Isaac and Ishmael, okay? Technically, I mean, they're kin, the cousins, okay? Coming from Gilead, and their camels carrying gum, balm, and resin on their way to carry it down to Egypt. Then Judah said to his brothers, okay, the name of Judah is important because he will be the line from which David will come. Okay, so let us never glamorize people, making them out to be better than they are. Judah. Now, here I must say something. I was going to say it at the beginning before we started about the use of names. So when I say the name Judas, obviously you think of the one who betrayed Jesus and and we sing about Judas all during Holy Week, right? Okay, the betrayer. Judah and Judas, it's the same name. Okay, I mean, obviously you could tell that. It's just a question of the last consonant, an H or an S. Judah is the Hebrew version. Judas, the S, comes from the Greek. Okay, same story. What happening to Joseph will happen to Jesus in the gospel. We aren't there yet. It can't go there yet. But again, you can see where the images lie. Stripping him, then Judah said to his brothers, what profit is it if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? Profit, okay? Profit. Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay our hands on him, for he is our brother, our own flesh. Okay. So, and his brothers agreed. When some traders passed by, they drew Joseph up, lifting him up out of the pit, sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces. Not Judas, the New Testament Judas gets an extra 10, 30. And they took Joseph to Egypt. So Joseph is taken into exile, okay? Taken into exile. And we know shortly that he's going to be sold into slavery. Okay? Get rid of the dreamer, the favored one, and so on and so forth. So when Reuben returned to the pit and saw that Joseph was not in the pit, he tore his clothes. He returned to his brothers and said, the boy is gone, and where can I turn? Then they took Joseph's robe, slaughtered a goat, dripped their robe in the blood. Now, I honestly don't expect you to remember, but if you did, fantastic, because the slaughtering of a goat goes back to Jacob's deception. And putting on a garment, you see, also has to do with the slaughtering of a kid. Okay, so they had the long robe with sleeves taken to their father and said, this we have found. See now whether it is your son's robe or not. He recognized and said, is my son's robe? A wild animal has devoured him. Joseph is without doubt torn to pieces. They just made a little lie, and Jacob ran with it, okay, to a conclusion that they were hoping he would go. Okay? So lie and deceit. Now it's come back full circle. Jacob now is being lied and deceived by his own children, just as he did to his own father. Jacob tore his garments, put sackcloth on his loins, mourned for his son many days, and all his sons and all his daughters sought to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted and said, no, I shall go down to Sheol, the place of the dead, to my son mourning. Then his father bewailed him. Meanwhile, while the Midianites had sold him in Egypt to Potiphar, one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard. So we have, again, the introduction of Joseph, the whole movement, the whole sinfulness of the brothers. Again, we had it as we began today in chapter 34. And now we have chapter 38, which will be our last chapter. And we have 12 minutes, so we do have time. But chapter 38 is like 36. You can remove it, and the storyline continues. So you could not read chapter 38 because it has nothing to do with the story of Joseph. 39 will pick up with Joseph in Egypt as a slave in the house of Potiphar, which then begs the question, Why do they disrupt their storyline and tell us a story that seemingly is disconnected and can stand by itself? Okay. I believe therefore we need to pay more attention to it. Okay. What is the writer saying to us in this critical chapter? And it will have to be with Judah. Okay. It has to do with the story of Judah and Judah's sins. Because ultimately, okay, the punchline at the end of 2 Kings is that the tribe of Judah is a disaster, and therefore they are taken back into exile in the whole history of the story of Kings. Okay, so this is the groundwork for what lies ahead, not only for the rest of the story, but also what's going to happen later on in with Joseph. Because yes, Joseph is stripped of his identity, removed from his family, sold into slavery, but he will be stripped again. But that won't happen till 2 weeks from today, in the last when we finish Genesis. But just to show you how the writer has woven the storyline through his use of images and other things. So let's do chapter 38. It happened at the time that Judah went down from his brothers and settled near a certain Adulamite whose name was Hirah. Then Judah saw the daughter of a certain Canaanite whose name was Shua. He married her, went into her. She conceived and bore a son, named him Again she conceived and bore a son, who she named Onan. Yet again she bore a son and named him Shelah. She was in Kezib when she bore him. Judah took a wife for his firstborn. Her name was Tamar. Okay, so again, be fruitful, multiply. We heard that. Okay, all looks good for Judah. He takes a wife, has 3 sons, so on and so forth. Firstborn has a wife named Tamar. But Judah's firstborn, was wicked in the sight of the Lord. Okay, we've had this phrase before, certainly just the time of Noah, before, when there was a wickedness in the land everywhere, and God decided to judge and to put them all, destroy them all. So you have to connect the link, okay? And the Lord put him to death. Then Judah said to Onan, "Go in to your brother's wife and perform the duty of a brother-in-law to raise up offspring for your brother." Okay, this is the custom of the Levirate marriage. Okay, the firstborn is childless, dead. Okay, you have to continue the progeny of the firstborn. So the next brother up has the responsibility, so that the brother's name and line will continue, and the child born of that will belong to the firstborn's name, not to the second. So then Judah said to him, "Go into your brother's wife, perform the duty of your brother-in-law." Okay, raise up offspring for your brother. But since Onan knew that the offspring would not be his, he spilled his semen on the ground whenever he went into his brother's wife, so that he would not give offspring to his brother. Okay. Again, I know it may sound odd to your ears, but it is the struggle between the firstborn and the secondborn. Okay, it's the same, because who gets the inheritance? Okay, yeah, this is the way life was in Europe not that much long ago. Okay, if you weren't the firstborn, you were out of luck. You went and became priests. Anyway, so, but Onan, okay, so he knew that. So what he did was displeasing in the sight of the Lord, and he put him to death also. Then Judah said to his daughter-in-law, Tamar, "Remain a widow in your father's house until my son Shelah grows up, for he feared that he too would die like his brothers." So Tamar went to live in her father's house. Okay, so Tamar is being exiled herself in a type of disgrace and punishment, waiting for the next brother. In the course of time, the wife of Judah, Shua's daughter, died. When Judah's time of mourning was over, he went up to Timnah to his sheep bearers, and he and his friend Hirah the Adulamite. So you're getting more insight into Judah's character. When Tamar was told, your father-in-law is going up to Timnah to shear his sheep, notice how resourceful she is. She put off her widow's garments, put on a veil, wrapped herself up, sat down at the entrance to Enaim, which is on the road to Timnah. She saw that Shelah was grown up, yet she had not been given to him in marriage. So she has been deceived. She has been wronged. She's seeking justice. When Judah saw her, he thought her to be a prostitute, for she had covered her face. Again, this is the widowed Judah, time of mourning over. Apparently, his sexual appetite is overcoming him. He went over to her on the roadside and said, "Come, let me come in to you," where he did not know that she was his daughter-in-law. Deceit again. She said, "What will you give me that you may come into me?" He answered, "I will send you a kid from the flock." Okay, so now we have the kid with Joseph, the kid with Jacob and the stealing of thing, and now we have the kid here. Okay. She said, "Only if you give me a pledge until you send it." Okay, she's shrewd. She's not going to trust his word. He said, "What pledge shall I give you?" She replied, "Your signet and your cord and the staff that is in your hand." Okay, now, just remember, a few chapters ago, we had a negotiation on the price of Dinah. Okay, so negotiation again, and she is shrewd. Now, you may ask, what is a signet? What is a cord? What is a staff? What are these emblematic of? Okay, as one commentator said, it's like giving away your passport and all your credit cards. Okay, the symbols of who you are, your authority, your identity. You see your stamp. Okay, your signature, if you will, and then the image of the staff. So an exact, quite steep price. And he was quite willing to pay, apparently. So he gave them to her and went into her, and she conceived by him. And she got up and went away, and taking off her veil, she put on the garments of her widowhood. When Judah sent the kid by his friend the Adulamite to recover the pledge from the woman, he could not find her. He asked the townspeople, "Where is the temple prostitute who was at Enaim by the wayside?" But they said, "No prostitute has been here." So he turned to Judah and said, "I have not found her." Moreover, the townspeople said no prostitute was here. Judah replied, "Let her keep the things as her own, otherwise we will be laughed at. You see, I sent this kid and you could not find her." Okay, in other words, he's going to make public humiliation and mockery, okay, for exchanging valuable personal items. Now, after 3 months later, Judah was told, "Your daughter-in-law Tamar has played the whore. Moreover, she is pregnant as a result of whoredom." And Judah said, apparently, even though she's living with her father, she is still under his authority, without any sort of thinking, reflection, getting the details, bring her out and let her be burned. Okay. And what's nice in Hebrew, it's more powerful. It's literally 2 words. That's it. She must be killed for her crime. Put that in your mind as you think of all of the crimes that we've been privy to as readers. She was being brought out. She sent word to her father-in-law, "It is the owner of these who made me pregnant." And she said, "Take note, please. Whose they are, the signet, the cord, and the staff." Judah acknowledged them and said, "She is in the right more than I, since I did not give her to my son Shelah." See, he had disgraced and dishonored her. Okay. And that was it. And he did not lie with her again. So the irony is that the brothers didn't raise up children, but unknowingly the father did, which makes it more heinous. Okay. When the time of her delivery came, there were twins in her womb. While she was in labor, we've had this before, right? Sorry, Rebecca. When she was in labor, one put out a hand, and the midwife took it and bound on his hand a crimson thread, saying, "This one came out first." But just then he drew back his hand, and out came his brother. And she said, "What a breach you have made for yourself." Therefore his name was Perez. Afterward his brother came out with the crimson thread on the hand, and his name was Zerah. This is the story of the birth of Jacob and Esau all over again. So now what happens, of course, is that the line of David goes through Perez, okay? Perez, which means that from the very beginning, the firstborn heir who died because he was evil, did not functionally become his children, as should have been the case, okay? They become the children of Jacob. And it is through this illicit thing that you have the line of Jacob continuing from Judah to the Davidic line, okay? Now, we're not going to talk about David in Genesis because he doesn't exist in Genesis, but it's laying the groundwork for the nastiness, because we like to glorify David, the beloved, that's what his name means, but in fact, you will see that he ultimately is not any better. And that any promise and covenant made to David, which will be a Davidic covenant made, where God promises again that one of your sons will sit on the throne, blah, 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 okay? In spite, okay? Everything is done in spite, okay? So that ends this strange chapter of Judah, because what's going to happen at the end is Joseph, like the children of Tamar, that should have been to her first husband, heir, is always going to be stripped of his children as well. Okay, but that's a different story. You have to see how it happens in the end. Okay, so that ends tonight. Oh, let me find my disc recording here.